Brand new trucks, off the lot last year, are grenading their engines before 30,000 miles, some a good bit sooner. Getting hauled off the interstate on a flatbed before the first real service is even due, and it is not one bad apple at one bad plant. It is General Motors, it is Ford, it is Ram, and here is the one that knocked me back in my chair, it is Toyota too. And here is the detail that told me everything. The fix General Motors is mailing out right now is to pour thicker oil back into the engine. That is the whole repair. I will show you that paperwork in a minute. Here is what the brochures leave out, and it is not that some engineer forgot how to build a motor. Something changed across the entire industry, on purpose, and it points to something a whole lot bigger than any one recall. Stay with me to the end, because the real reason these motors are dying is not what you think, and the last thing I am going to hand you, the stuff you can actually do about it, could save you a $15,000 repair bill, and I will shoot straight the whole way. Not every one of these trucks is a time bomb, and I will tell you which engines I would still put my own money on. To understand why the new ones are dying, you have to understand why the old ones did not. Take a truck motor from the early 90s. Big, simple, naturally aspirated V8. Thick cast iron. The clearances were loose, measured in thousandths of an inch, packed with heavy oil that coated every surface. And here is a detail almost nobody talks about. The bearings in those old engines had a soft layer right on the surface. If a speck of grit got into the oil, it just pressed harmlessly down into that soft metal and sat there. You could skip an oil change, tow more than you had any business towing, run it hard in the July heat, and it forgave you. Those motors gave you room to make a mistake. That is why so many of them are still on the road today. Now look at a modern truck engine. Smaller, turbocharged, sometimes 2 turbos, running peak cylinder pressure over 2,000 pounds per square inch. That is pressure they use to save for race motors that get torn down after every weekend. The clearances are measured in microns, thinner than a human hair. The oil is thinner than it has ever been. And the bearings are a hard metal that will not embed a speck of debris and will not forgive one bad moment. My read is simple. They built these motors right up against the edge. And when you take away every bit of forgiveness, one piece of grit, one skipped service, one rough part from the factory is not a hiccup anymore. It is a dead engine, and you do not have to take my word for it, because the numbers coming out of General Motors are hard to believe. This is on the truck that was supposed to be the gold standard of American V8 power. If you own a 2021 through 2024 GM truck or big SUV with the 6.2-liter V8, the engine code is L87. Listen close. That is the Silverado 1500, the Sierra 1500, the Tahoe, the Yukon, the Suburban, and the Cadillac Escalade. General Motors recalled nearly 600,000 of them. And a separate federal investigation covers more than 870,000 going back to 2019 because the failures kept showing up on trucks older than the recall even covers. The government has logged over 1,000 reports of these engines spinning a bearing, knocking, and throwing a rod. That is the connecting rod punching clean through the side of the block. The motor kills itself from the inside out. 2 things go wrong at once. Metal grit left in the engine at the factory, circulating in the oil, and crankshafts machined rough, out of spec, grinding the bearings like sandpaper. With thick oil and loose clearances, either one might have been survivable. With this thin oil and these tight clearances, there is no room left to absorb either. And here is the line that tells the whole story. General Motors' own fix switches these engines off 0W20 oil and onto 0W40, twice as thick. That is not a fix for grit. That is General Motors quietly admitting the factory oil never had enough protection to begin with. They just did not say it out loud until almost 600,000 trucks were already sold. Now, if this were only GM, you could write it off as one company having a rough couple years. But the same story is playing out at Ford and at Ram, and set side by side, it gets almost funny. Both of them, on their big diesel trucks, use the exact same high-pressure fuel pump from Bosch. They call it the CP4. And that pump has a nasty habit of eating itself alive and blowing metal shavings through the whole fuel system. When it lets go, you can lose power right now in traffic, and the repair can run north of $10,000. Ford recalled close to 300,000 Super Duty trucks over it. The F-250, the F-350, the 2020 through 2022 model years. Ram recalled more than 220,000 of its Cummins trucks, the Ram 2500 and the 3500 back to 2019. Same pump, same defect, but watch what each one did about it. Ram pulled the CP4 right out and put in the older, tougher CP3. They fixed the actual part. Ford's fix was a software update. A reflash of the computer to run the fuel system cooler and hope the pump holds together. They did not touch the pump. Chew on that. Same defect. And one company changed the hardware while the other just changed the settings. And I will be straight. Ford's gas half-tons and Ram's old Hemi have their own headaches too, but those are lawsuits and complaints, not recalls, so I leave them right there. Here is the one that really got me though. Toyota. The whole reason a man pays extra for a Tundra over a Silverado is that Toyota is not supposed to cut corners. So Toyota took the old 5.7-liter V8, a genuinely bulletproof motor, and replaced it with a smaller 3.4-liter twin-turbo 6. More power, better mileage, the next generation of Toyota. And then they left grinding debris inside them at the factory. Same tune you have heard all day. Grit in the engine, this time chewing up the #1 main bearing. No warning light, no noise. The truck feels completely normal right up until the second it seizes. Owners are losing brand new $80,000 trucks before 40,000 miles. And the recall keeps growing. It started at around 102,000 trucks. It is now past 270,000. Toyota was replacing the whole engine, over 70,000 of them, then started leaning toward just inspecting instead, and a lot of owners are not happy about that. Here is the tell for me. When independent shops tore these dead Toyotas apart, the main bearings were cooked, but the rod bearings, sharing the exact same oil, were almost clean. If this were random grit floating around, you would see damage everywhere. When one bearing dies and the rest are fine, that is not just dirt. That is a design running too tight for the heat a downsized twin-turbo throws off. Even Toyota got pulled over the edge. So here is where most folks stop, blaming one bad engine at a time. But these are not 4 separate accidents. They are 4 symptoms of the same disease. Here is the real reason, the thing I promised you at the top. For the better part of 20 years, the government fined the automakers $17 for every tenth of a mile per gallon their fleet came up short on fuel economy. Miss by 1 mile per gallon across 2 million vehicles, and you were staring at over $300 million in fines, so they chased every last drop of mileage any way they could. That is why the big naturally aspirated V8s got swapped for little turbo motors. That is why the oil got thinner and thinner, from 5W30 down to 0W20, then 0W16, and now they are talking 0W8, oil so thin it feels like water in your hand. That is why they piled on cylinder shutoff and stop-start. None of that makes an engine last longer. It moved a number on a government fuel test. Now here's the kicker. Congress zeroed that fine out in 2025. Today, the automakers pay nothing for missing it. But that is like dropping the speed limit after the wreck already happened. Every one of these engines was designed and tooled up under that pressure, and they are on dealer lots right now. The fine is gone. The engines it built are not. And if you have been nodding along, thinking they just do not build them like they used to, tap that like button, because after digging through all of this, it is getting real hard to argue otherwise. And if you are hoping somebody just fixes all this, look at Hyundai, because they got here first. After their engines started failing and catching fire, Hyundai paid out a settlement worth $1.3 billion, millions of cars. And their answer was not to redesign the engine. It was a software update, a knock sensor program that listens for the sound of a bearing starting to go, then cuts your engine's power before it can seize on the highway. Owners started calling it the death code. Now, catching a failure before it turns into a fire on the interstate, that is worth something. But catching a bad bearing is not the same as fixing one. You are driving a truck where the answer is a computer listening to a part they already know is weak, waiting on it to break. And owners reported that even the replacement engines went right on failing the same way. That tells you the design underneath was never actually corrected. That is where this is heading. Not better engines, just smarter alarms bolted onto engines they know are living on the edge. So what can you actually do about it? Because there are real steps here, and a couple cost almost nothing. First, go to nhtsa.gov and punch in your VIN tonight. If you are sitting in an open recall, get it scheduled. Most of these failures give you no warning at all, so do not wait to feel a problem. Second, change your oil every 5,000 miles, no matter what the manual says. Those 7,500 and 10,000 mile intervals are a cost of ownership sales pitch, not an engineering number, and that goes double on a turbo direct injection motor. Third, if you've got a direct injection engine, have the intake valves cleaned every 40 to 60,000 miles, or sooner if it runs rough. The gas does not wash the back of the valves anymore, so carbon cakes up and chokes them, and it never throws a light. Walnut shell blasting is the real fix. Fourth, once you are out of warranty, stepping up one grade of oil is not crazy. If General Motors is now telling people to run 0W40 in that 6.2, a slightly heavier oil in your own motor just gives those bearings a fighting chance. And if you are shopping used, treat a 2021 through 2024 turbo motor from any of these brands with real caution. A clean, older V8 with good highway miles might be the smarter buy right now. So there it is. 4 truck makers, 1 story. The engine, the one part we always trusted to outlast the whole truck, quietly stopped being the part they build to go the distance. They built it to pass a fuel test and survive the warranty and let you find out the hard way. Now, I am not telling you every new truck is junk. A used Tundra with the old 5.7, a Tacoma with the 4-liter, the 7.3 Power Stroke, the 12-valve Cummins, those are still motors I would put my own money on tomorrow. The lesson is not to fear all of them. It is to buy the engine, not the badge on the hood. So let me hear from you. What is the highest mileage you have ever put on one engine, and what truck was it in? Drop it in the comments, because I read them. And would you trust one of these new turbo motors to ever get there? If this saved you from a bad buy, and you want the whole playbook on picking a truck, keeping it alive, and knowing when to walk away, I put together a book called The Right Ride. It covers the traps, the maintenance that matters, and the exact models to chase and to skip. I am not going to hard sell you. There is a link in the description if you want it. Either way, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Take care of the one you have got, folks, because they do not build them to forgive you anymore. This is Frank.